Going live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, my students, and welcome to the class. I apologize for not being here yesterday. So this is how it's going to work. Today, right now, if you're watching this, we're going to have this class. How do you like the scruff, by the way? I know I look different, but thank you. All right. Now, a lot of the times in the English language, my students, we have this mentality that the word will is used to talk about the future, but that is not true, my students. The word will is not only used to talk about the future, it has different functions, but we're going to have a class just on will in the future. For now, let's talk about a different part of the English language, right? Let's hone in, right? Let's focus on a specific piece of grammar, okay, my students? Now, when we think of the present tense, what comes to your mind? Well, we use the present tense to talk about habituality, things that you do habitually, right? So for example, I can say, I'm eating pizza, right? That means that I'm doing it right now. But if I say I eat pizza, it means that I do it habitually, regularly, right? Now you can intensify that, right? You can say, I always eat pizza, and that's fine. That's basically, think of the difference between this, I eat pizza, and I always eat pizza, okay? That's the difference. Now, the present tense in the English language is also used to talk about the future, but in very specific situations. What am I talking about? Well, I'll tell you what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the present tense being used to talk about scheduled events, okay? Scheduled events and scientific events and other things. But for now, let's focus on scheduled events. What am I saying about, no, not scheduled events, scientific events. Now, for scientific events, my students, think of an eclipse. Now, can you change an eclipse? Well, no, you can't. You can't change an eclipse. Why? Because an eclipse is something that will happen yes or yes. Now, think of rain. Rain doesn't always happen consistently at the same time, the same day of the year, right? So it's not really scheduled by anyone, you see? Now, the present tense is used to talk about these scientific events that, let's say, you can say are scheduled, right? For example, we have an eclipse. So you can say, for example, there is going to be an eclipse tomorrow. Okay, and that's fine. So there is going to be an eclipse tomorrow. And remember, we can say there's gonna, and that's fine, right? So there is going to be an eclipse tomorrow, and there's gonna be an eclipse tomorrow. We've learned how going to and gonna, the difference between the contraction and the uncontracted, there's a difference in meaning, right? But we're not gonna focus on that right now. We're gonna focus on using the present tense, because you could also say, there is an eclipse tomorrow. Okay? So you can say, there's an eclipse tomorrow. Why there's an eclipse tomorrow? Well, because you're using the present tense is to talk about the future, because it is a scientific scheduled event. Do you understand? So there's an eclipse tomorrow. Okay. Now, you can also say, for example, the tide comes in tomorrow, right? Okay, the tide comes in tomorrow. That's somewhat scientific, right? And scheduled. Now, we also have rain. Can you say it rains tomorrow, my students? Think about it. Can you say it rains tomorrow? Well, no, you can't. You can't say it rains tomorrow because you don't know if it's going to happen for sure or not. You can say, for example, it's going to rain tomorrow, right? You're assuming it's going to rain. Maybe the weather guy says there's going to be rain tomorrow at this specific time, but is it yes and yes, like an eclipse? Well, no, it's not a scheduled event. It's hypothetical, okay? So the tide comes in tomorrow, but we can't say it rains tomorrow. You see, it's very specific when you can use the present tense to talk about the future, all right? So here's another example. Scheduled events. Okay. Scheduled events. Very good. Now, why scheduled events? Well, think about this, my students, right? The eclipse, right? You can say it's scientific and to a certain extent that it's scheduled, okay? when I say scheduled events here, I'm talking about scheduled by humans. But you may say, well, think about this. If it's scheduled by a human, there's a chance that it can be canceled. Like, you can't cancel an eclipse. That's something that's going to happen yes or yes. So why is it that when humans schedule something, we can use the present tense to talk about the future, but we can't with rain, right? So it rains tomorrow, but we can't say, for example, no, we can't say it rains tomorrow, but we can say the new James Bond movie comes out tomorrow. Why? Well, the reason for that, my students, is unknown, surprisingly. But we can make assumptions, right? And this is an English class. This isn't a class about like, what's that called? Like philosophy or whatever, or religion. But you think about it like humans, they have this mentality. We have this mentality that if we schedule something to happen, it's going to happen because it was scheduled by me. Like, we don't really think, or we never really stop to think that there's a possibility that something may not happen the following day. It's not something we think about, you see? So maybe that's the reason why it reflects in our language. Who knows, right? Or in the English language, at least. Now, scheduled events. You can say the new James Bond movie is coming out tomorrow. And here you're using the present continuous, right? The new James Bond movie is coming out tomorrow. Very good. Now, you could also say the new James Bond movie is gonna come out tomorrow, and that's fine too. But notice how natural it sounds when you say the new James Bond movie comes out tomorrow. You're using the present tense to talk about a scheduled event, right? So let's say it again. The new James Bond movie. You can say film as well, movie or film. Okay, very good. Now, the new James Bond movie comes out tomorrow, right? Present tense, talk about the future. What's another scheduled event? Maybe you can say, I get married next month, right? It's the future. You're using the present get to talk about a scheduled event by humans. I'm getting married next month is fine, right? But I get married next month is fine as well, right? So you can say, for example, I get married next month. Okay, very good. Now, this is where the class gets very good. If you think the class was good now, my students, this is where it's going to get very good. So please concentrate, okay? Now, there are times when we use the present tense not just for scheduled events, right? But for very specific moments in the English language. For what? To show three things. And let's focus on one by one, okay? But I'm going to mention three first. One, to show that you are in charge. In charge? Yes, I'll show you what I'm talking about. That you have the right to use the present tense, but someone else doesn't. We'll get into that. The second one, right, is to show how imminent the situation is, okay? And the third one, right? So for example, before we get into the third one, let's talk about the two, okay? Let's say that you are always late to work, right? So you would say, I'm late to work all the time, right? Or I'm always late. Now, let's say that you get late to work, right? And your boss says to you, you can say, if you're late again, you're gonna be fired. And that's fine, okay? Now, conversely, in the same way, let's say that your friend knows your situation, right? And he says, Daniel, I heard my boss say that if you're late again, you're gonna be fired, or you're gonna get fired. Get fired sounds better. Get, because get is used for positive things and negative things. Very rarely is it used for neutral things if you're talking about the passive get, okay? So if you're late again, you're gonna get fired, okay? Now, the boss can also say this to you. If you're late again, you're fired. You're fired. Okay, very good. So, if you're late again, you're fired. Why is he using the present tense? Is he telling you that you're fired now? No, He's not telling you that you're fired now. He's using the present tense to show you that he is in charge and that what he's saying means business, that he's being serious about what he's saying. So serious that it's almost as if it happened already. You see? He's showing how imminent it is, as if it happened already. See, because when you use the present tense, it's kind of like you're showing how important the situation is, right? So if you're late again, you're fired, okay? But notice how specific this is, my students, because your friend, the one who said, if you're late again, you're gonna be fired, you're gonna get fired. This one, right? The boss can say this one. The boss can say, if you're late again, you're gonna get fired. But the boss could also say, if you're late again, you're fired. But your friend, the one giving you the information, secondhand information, he can't say, if you're late again, you're fired. You see? Your boss has the right to do that and to say that because he is your boss and he's showing it by using the present tense, right? So if you're late again, you're going to get fired. If you're late again, you're fired. This is very important, my students. This is the type of grammar that matters if you want to sound natural. Now, it's important to understand, my students, that this isn't a rule on how to speak. This is a rule. Hello, students. How are you? Mwah! It's good to see you. Okay. So this isn't a rule on how to speak, right? This is a rule on how people already speak. And that's important, okay? You're late to class, but it's fine. I'm going to review, okay? Now, we use the present tense in very specific situations to talk about the future, because many people have the mentality that we use the word will to talk about the future. But the word will has different functions in the English language, my students. Now, we can say, for example, there will be an eclipse tomorrow, right? But we can also say, there's an eclipse tomorrow. Okay? Okay, very good. Now, if you say there's an eclipse tomorrow, there's a very specific reason as to why you're saying there's. You're not saying there will be or there's going to be. No, you're saying there's. Zzz, right? Why there's? Well, you're using there is an eclipse tomorrow because you're talking about a scientific event, my students. Something that's going to happen, yes or yes. You can't stop an eclipse from happening, okay? Now, can you say it will rain tomorrow? Yes, you can. You can say it will rain tomorrow. Can you say it's gonna rain tomorrow? Yes. But can you use the present tense to talk about the future when you're talking about rain? No. Because rain isn't something that's gonna scientifically happen yes or yes. So you know there's gonna be an eclipse tomorrow, but you don't know that it's gonna rain tomorrow or not. So you can say, it's gonna rain tomorrow. It will rain tomorrow. It's gonna rain tomorrow. But you can't say it rains tomorrow because it's not something that's for sure. It's not a scheduled event, scientific scheduled event, okay? Very good. Now, something else we learned. We learned that is used for scheduled events by humans. And you may think, why by humans? If there's a big possibility that if it's scheduled by a human, it may not happen. Because anything could happen tomorrow, right? I can die tomorrow, right? And tomorrow may not come. Why is it that we use the present tense to talk about the future with scheduled events? Well, the answer to that, like I said, is we don't know, my students, okay? So I can say, for example, I go to the movies tomorrow. I go to the movies tomorrow. Or I go to the dentist tomorrow. Okay, very good. Very good. Okay. So you can say, for example, I go to the dentist tomorrow. You can say I'm going to the dentist, but you could also say I go to the dentist tomorrow. And there's this other rule embedded in this one, my students, that's even cooler than this one. And that's that we don't think about it, but we usually use the present continuous to talk about something that's going to happen close by in time. So, for example, it would sound better to say, let's say the get married one, right? Because you could say, I get married next month. Next month is far in time, right? But if you're talking, and this is, like I said to my students, this isn't something that's 100%. It's never 100%. This is just how people speak. This has been studied. People walk around with a notebook and a pen and they write these things down, right? Okay, we usually use a present continuous to talk about something that's happening further in time. So for example, you can say they're getting married tomorrow, right? You could also say they get married tomorrow, and that's fine. But chances are people are going to say, chances are, they get married next month. Than saying, for example, they get married tomorrow. You can say it, and it sounds perfectly fine, and there's nothing wrong with saying that. They get married tomorrow. And you can say they're getting married next month. Either is fine. I'm just showing you how people speak, my students, okay? This has probably been the most important class so far, my students. These are the type of rules that you need to learn in order to sound natural, okay? All right, very good. Love you guys. Sorry for not giving the class yesterday, all right? This is the class for today. I'm posting the test tonight, okay? So you guys take the test. That's all for today. See you next time.